The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, and live from Studio 27 in Sacramento, California. You're in the right place for how to get on the radar of the IT buyer with effective content marketing strategies. Sponsored by Rock the Deadline, an innovative content marketing and expert writer network, and hosted by WebAttract, a leader in webinar demand creation. Hi, I'm Mike Agron, the executive webinar producer with WebAttract. I'll be your moderator and one of your hosts for today's webinar, which is all about how you can better understand from our panel of IT enterprise experts how they prioritize what's important to them that ultimately leads to purchasing decisions. Now, you're also going to have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of our panel discussion during our Ask the Experts session. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. And I'd like to tell you just a moment who's here. We have a very diverse audience, primarily made up of IT sellers, marketing professionals, sales managers, and agency creatives. We've invited you here today to be part of today's webinar. A couple housekeeping tips. We want you to ask questions as frequently and as many times as you'd like. I know this isn't your first webinar, but if you take a look at your control panel, you just enter a question in there. We'll get to it during our Ask the Experts session. What questions we can answer on air, we promise to have a subject matter expert from the team get back to you. Also, if you're the tweeting type, there's our handles. We're also going to have some fun with some online polling. We're going to get your input and let you weigh in on a couple of important topics. We'd love to also have you weigh in on how today's webinar met your expectations. There'll be a short, brief survey at the end of the webinar. We'll also give you an opportunity to request more information, including a free ebook. And today's webinar is being recorded. You will all be receiving an email in a couple of days with a link for a copy of the recording. So let's get started about what we're dealing with today from the perspective of the IT buyer. I don't think any of us on here don't deal with information overload. How many tweets a day we're getting, our inbox is always overloaded. I know I can never get mine down. And then what we're seeing from the website with 3 million IT vendors out there, there's a lot of information. So what today is about is to have our panel put into context what are the key functions of the IT buyer. What do they think about? How do they prioritize things? So in just a moment, when I turn over to the panel, we're going to talk about how technical thought leadership enters their decision-making process, how they support key business initiatives, and how they make decisions. But to get started, let's begin with some input from you, and I'm going to launch the first poll. And what we would love to hear from you is, as someone who sells to IT, which of the following would you rank as your top challenges to get on the radar screen of your buyer? Would it be being heard, that is rising above the noise? Is it determining the right message? Or how to nurture and sustain awareness? Choosing the right channels to promote your message? Or are there other things? These are very important things that we want to make sure we cover today, and based upon how everybody votes on this and evaluates this is where our panel is going to be spending their time. So I'm going to keep the poll open just a little bit longer and give every one of you an opportunity to weigh in. And I see quite a few interesting categories dominating. I'll share those results with you in just a moment. So I'm going to keep this thing going. And again, is your challenge in reaching your IT buyer and getting on the radar screen being heard? Is it determining the right message? Is it being able to nurture and sustain awareness, or choosing the right channels to promote your message? Well, it looks like just about everybody who's voted has. I'm going to go ahead and close the polls, and thank you. And let me share the results. They're quite interesting. If you take a look at your screen, it looks like actually almost in order, 32% said being heard, rising above the noise. 27% said, what's the right message? How do you determine that? Then 16%, how do you nurture and sustain awareness? 22% choosing the right channels. 3% said other. Well, that's great. That's perfect. That's exactly what we wanted to hear from everybody. And now I want to move into bringing on our thought leadership panel. We've got some real seasoned experts. In no particular order, I'm going to start with Kim Seabury, who's the Director of IT at a company called AngioDynamics. And Kim's got more than 17 years of experience where she's led global technology teams for startup internet firms. She's worked for world-class software development companies and the medical device industry. I know her strategic areas of focus have been in web operations, IT, research and development, and most recently, she's had a focus on emerging solutions and software as a service, and she previously was Vice President of Product Development at Pitney Bowes Business Insight. And from New York, welcome to the webinar, Kim.
Thanks, Mike. It's great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Rick Lloyd, and he's the Director of Technology and Planning and Strategy for Pitney Bowes, a $5 billion global company. He's been in the IT industry for 17 years, where his responsibilities have varied from application development, infrastructure and network support, organizational planning, and technology strategy. And throughout the bulk of his time, he's had responsibility for technology and vendor recommendations and or selection for his teams. So Rick brings a lot to the webinar too, and also out of New York. Hi, Rick. How you doing?
Hey, great to be here, Mike. Thanks.
Thank you. And finally, last but not least, is Kim Sue Lloyd, who is the COO of Rock the Deadline. And she's been a product manager for enterprise software. She's got over 15 years experience, and she did that before founding Rock the Deadline. And actually, she was the COO of another online media company that grew visitors from 0 to 18 million a month just from using content marketing tactics. Well, it's a pleasure to have the three of you, and Kim Sue Lloyd, I'm going to turn it over to you to get the conversation going, and I'll be back in just a little bit. But for now, Kim, it's your show.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here. I'm especially excited about the fact that we actually have 2 women on an IT thought leadership panel, so that's kind of exciting. And I also think that a lot of you are here during your lunch break, and I wanted to thank you for that. So I'm going to dive right into my interview questions. The first key functional area that I wanted to discuss is that of technology thought leadership. Keeping up with industry trends and opportunities is a research mode that you're in where content marketing, tactics, and strategies come into play. So Kim, why don't we start with you? What do you do to keep up with what is happening on the internet and in your industry? And just give us a couple of examples so that the audience can really understand what you look at.
Okay. Well, since there's so many ways to keep up on trends in technology, let me kind of first start by classifying them for you. You know, there are hard copies that I receive in the mail. I also receive numerous emails daily. There's blogs and feeds that I subscribe to, as well as websites. So personally, I like my information in small, easy-to-read doses, but if I find something that's too long, you know, you'd lose me quickly. I want those small nuggets. But if I bump into something in that reading that's something I'm currently researching or find interest in because it's a driving trend, then I want more. So typically in the form of a link for further reading or something that connects me to more information and where to go get it. So good examples of these are in print, Information Technology Advisor. It's kind of the Cliff Notes version, you know, a little eye candy that I can read quickly. For email and web content, I would say CIO, Tech Republic, Technology Advisors, and also I looked at vendor-specific emails that I receive pertinent to my business. On blogs, I would say most recently I've been researching ERP solutions, and so for that I typically turn into blogs related to topical information on something I'm researching, or in med device in the industry that I'm in currently. I'm looking at technology bits for that specific industry. And then finally on websites, I mean, this is all and everything. This is where I do a lot of my research. So I would say the one thing that's really important for me when I'm looking at websites, though, is the vintage of the material. You know, how frequent are the updates on different websites? And I like and enjoy reading real-world experiences that are all relevant.
Rick, can you jump in? Thanks, Kim.
Sure. So in addition to a lot of the stuff that Kim mentioned there, I subscribe to a number of daily newsletters, blogs, and digests or weeklies. Some that stand out for me are TechCrunch, Tech Republic, and further really new stuff that's up and coming for kind of the venture capital industry. I actually like VentureBeat. I'm a fan of Chuck Hollis's blog at EMC. He's their global marketing CTO. And I also keep up with a number of Microsoft and Windows related weekly digests because pretty much all of our end user computing landscape before BYOD reared its head has been in the Microsoft space. And I also use Google Alerts on some key areas of interest to me at any given time to get that focus.
Since I am a keyword hound and Google Alerts is driven off of keywords, can you give the audience some examples of keywords that you may follow?
Well, so like I said a second ago, BYOD is one that's rearing its head, so I'm keen on some things in that space. So BYOD strategy or BYOD solutions, and some of the keywords that might go with that would be MEAP or mobile enterprise application platforms, mobile device management, big data analytics is another one that I'm starting to track, and then end-to-end performance monitoring as a software as a service provider. We need to better understand what our landscape is doing at any given time in terms of performance, and that's something that we're trying to always improve on.
So I know Gartner is a key resource, and unfortunately not everyone can afford to be visible in Gartner reports. How do you keep up with up-and-coming technology and new entrants to the market that may have a really cool technology, but they're not covered in Gartner? What do you do for that, Rick?
So on the discovery of new trends, there are a few things outside of the reading stuff that I do. And some examples are we have a collection of strategic partners that we try to have annual meetings with at a minimum where they reveal their roadmap to us and we start to understand the direction that they're going. I also attend a number of conferences like Gartner Catalyst or Gartner Symposium. Sorry, I'm still on the Gartner trend there. Enterprise 2.0 and Web 2.0 related things. Additionally, there's a report that I use by the Infrastructure Executive Council that's part of the Executive Research Board called the Enterprise Heat Map, which gives some indicators as to when given companies or other enterprises are thinking about implementing new technologies that are emerging. And as an enterprise of some size, we're kind of risk averse and we want to avoid being on the bleeding edge most of the time. And I guess as a guilty pleasure, I'm a bit of a gadget freak, so I check out some of the tech shopping sites like Newegg and Tiger Direct.
Great. Kim, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Rick had a pretty full answer, and I would echo all of that. I look to key events, webinars, conferences, etc. But one item I'd like to add is that I also listen pretty carefully to the people I work with. So I have the good fortune of working with a lot of really smart people who have time at home where they're on different technologies, and there are times that the next hot industry trend actually starts at home. So good examples in the past are things like Skype or bring your own device, as Rick mentioned, and then mobile apps like Dropbox and others that are just really good business tools. So I think that it makes sense from an IT perspective that it becomes part of our tool bag, because if we're not keeping an eye on what the users actually want to use and what they're used to using, then we're not keeping up with them in order to do our jobs.
Great. So let's talk specifically about attention to trends, and let's give an example of a trend that you found out about that made you just kind of sit up and think, I'd better pay attention to this. Rick, let's get started with you.
Okay, so this one probably goes back about 18 months, but the one that I wasn't paying much attention to was the consumerization trends in IT. One day I thought we had a firm handle on what our end-user computing environment looked like, Windows XP and Office 2003. And the next day I wake up and find we've got about 10,000 smart devices in our environment at one level or another, and a bunch of Macintoshes. And I think that realization is something that a lot of enterprises have stumbled into. BYOD has sort of happened around us. Really before our policies and tools were ready, half the users had iPhones and were connecting to our exchange server and all of a sudden had access to the information. So it's been a scramble to ramp up on technologies like mobile enterprise application platforms, mobile device management, ways to prevent data loss through these consumer devices, enterprise file sharing, and how other companies are making their choices with each of those technologies. Luckily, in the 400 plus emails per day that I get, and using Google search, I was able to find a number of those emails that I'd gotten from other vendors, and eventually, seeing that rule of seeing a name 7 times before the brand sinks in started to catch up, and I started looking at some of those companies more closely.
Kim, do you have something you want to add as a specific example?
Sure. Well, I wouldn't say that this terminology is new. I'd have to say software as a service, or SaaS. Having been in the software development side of SaaS in my previous life with Pitney, and now back into IT, I've obviously been a very strong advocate of that model. But in IT, it really takes a lot of muscle to manage a full-service IT shop, and the ability to use SaaS as part of your IT ecosystem, I'll call it, makes sense. It can be a terrific way to limit your spending in IT in some areas. It decreases a lot of your need to deeply train people in technologies, and surprisingly, that does take up a bit of time and money to do that. And it can also help you to decrease risk. So it can be a real game changer for you. And although the term's been tossed around a lot for a few years, I do still believe it's in its adolescence. So I think there's a lot of ground to gain there. So I still pay close attention to software as a service.
Great. So I think to wrap up this section, I think it's important for the audience who are trying to develop content marketing strategies to kind of get on your radar from an industry research standpoint. What really works for you? Are you, for example, are you skeptical of vendor-supplied white papers? Would you rather see a neutral third party? What kinds of content really work for you here? Rick, let's start with you.
So I think there's a couple of phases to this. First, I'm not an expert in all things, even though the job title might imply that I'm supposed to be. For example, I've managed to avoid learning a lot about databases for most of my career in IT. And with the emergence of big data as an area that I need to understand, I really appreciate some material that's almost purely educational, defining the space and the reason it has come to exist, and why do I, as a IT provider, need to care? What problems are going to emerge that I'm going to be seeking solutions for, or what great gains in productivity will I see because I take action? And the second part is I need to see that a vendor gets my problems and has solved these types of problems for other people before me. As I said, I don't like to be on that bleeding edge as a larger enterprise. We're risk averse. So if a vendor has a track record of solving these problems and really understanding my problems, they get my attention a little quicker than one who's just telling me about capabilities and features in a product.
Great. Kim?
Yeah, and I really actually appreciate, like Rick, both the value of vendor and neutral positions, because I find that you really need to consider both to have a balanced view, because each are going to come at it from their own angle. So I do appreciate both of them.
Great. So I'm just going to wrap up this section really quick with how much time do you spend a day? It sounds like this would take up a huge chunk of your time. Kim, let's start with you.
Sure. And depending upon what mode I'm in at work, it probably, I would say, average about 4 to 6 hours per week doing some sort of research. But recently, I spent closer probably to the range of 20 hours a week, specifically researching ERP and other technologies. And this was due to a large acquisition that our company just made. So my role, I look at it as I have to stay ahead of things and be thinking about that in context of today. So I've got to challenge my team, not just to do their job, but I've got to make sure they're adding value by trying to solve today's problems and thinking about how that's going to be applicable tomorrow, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're not spending your dollars wisely.
Okay, so excluding conferences and meetings, I'd say that I probably spend between 20 minutes and 2 hours per day just reading emails or diving into the specifics on a vendor or educating myself on a technology area. And that's just reading time. I also, as I said, have those partnership meetings where I'm drilling into the capabilities of a given partner. And I attend webinars when I'm looking to do a deeper dive into some companies or a technology that is something I'm looking to do.
That completely leads us to the next section, which is business initiative support. So we talked about keeping up with industry trends, which is a very proactive task, and now we're going to move into a little bit of from the standpoint of your company has specific goals that they want to accomplish, or a business stakeholder, knocks on your office door and says, hey, I really need help with something, and all of a sudden you have to become a technological expert on something. Give us a specific example of something you were recently tasked with, and tell us a little bit about what you did what you had to get up to speed on. How about Rick?
Okay. So I kind of hit on BYOD already, and when most companies think of BYODs, they start to think about it as a worry word, right? I have to worry about the security of my environment with BYOD, but it also has some potential benefits. And recently, one of our executives tasked me with figuring out how do we build mobile apps for internal use. So now I'm starting to explore how companies are deploying to multiple platforms with minimal effort, not having to rewrite every app they do for every single device and platform, i.e. that write once and deploy anywhere. And how do we connect to back office applications that are driving our business transactions, and we start presenting on mobile platforms. These are vital for us to be successful with that. I need good content to help educate me on this, and I don't know a ton about mobile enterprise application platforms or even what vendors are active in this space. So I'm exploring these areas with Google searches, mail searches, and watching various other feeds to try and capture some of that info.
All right, Kim, do you have anything you want to share?
Sure. I mentioned in my last answer to your question that I've been most recently tasked with a very large acquisition. So it's double the size of the company that I work for, and this project includes an ERP vendor selection and implementation. We have to do full network integration, including a brand new phone system in some of our locations. It includes master data management and reporting, security, support, and also combine two separate IT teams and make one cohesive group that all works well and happy together.
Is that all?
Yeah, that's all. And by the way, get it all done in 12 months. So a big task in front of me.
All right, good. So that, that's usually the case. 12 months may sound like a long time, but not when you're doing some big things like you are tasked with. So let's talk a little bit about what you did to quickly get up to speed on this kind of information. What content did you use? How did you do your research? Kim, let's start with, follow up with your existing example.
Yeah, for me, the starting point actually began the day I was brought in to do the early due diligence. So this was prior to the announcement of the acquisition. So, I knew what the company's objectives were for the acquisition, and it was a simple statement. It was act as one as quickly and non-disruptively as possible. And that's one sentence that says far too much to an IT person. So for that, the discussion led me to, for this discussion, let me just focus on the ERP part, because what I talked about earlier is so big. So for the ERP project, I began with a general baseline of the systems that are in place today in both organizations, and then I kicked it into research mode. I read a lot of white papers. I was active in reading a lot of blogs, down to knowledge bases within the specific vendor's website, and I came up to speed on technology as quickly as I could in a short period of time. I also joined communities through LinkedIn and other business sites, so I find a lot of value out of those. And from that, it gave me a really good base understanding not only of the technology, but also how to support and think about the ERP fit in the company now and going forward. So it was pretty well-rounded.
Rick?
So I'll actually jump to another area. And I mentioned that I was doing research on big data analytics. The reality is I don't have a big data problem today, but I think I'm going to. So I'm in a certain phase of my research there. As our products become hosted or software as a service oriented, we have the opportunity to learn a bit more about our customers' behaviors or become predictive in their behavior. Or even start to better understand how our internal IT systems are performing and responding to the loads that our customers are putting on them through the use of those solutions. So as I said earlier, I've successfully avoided databases most of my career. Well, I'm at a point where I can't avoid them anymore. So my process has started with learning what big data is and how it's different from data as we know it. What companies play in the space, who of those vendors or what have those vendors done for other companies with these problems. And I've also watched a webinar or two on the technologies and how they work.
Great. Webinars are important, hence why we're doing this one today. So let's move on to something specific. I want to talk about what may have worked for you in getting your attention, what may have kind of turned you off. Kim, do you want to start here?
You know, I recently actually had a great experience with a technology partner. So let me talk about that specifically. I had to bring somebody in to have a conversation, and they specifically knew my industry. And it was really important that the vendor know the industry because there are so many nuances. It's great to talk to somebody that understands technology, but to know how to apply that technology in my environment is pretty important. You know, and on the other hand, you know, in the same conversations doing due diligence, you know, when I'm talking to another company that just knows technology, they were excellent technologists, but they were going to fall short of what I needed. So those are some of my very recent specific examples of two vendors that got my attention and why they were good at what they did, or maybe not so good, not a good fit.
And I'm just going to continue on to ask you the couple more that add on to this question, and then I'll go to Rick. But what should they keep in mind when creating that kind of educational content during your understanding of the landscape phase?
Yeah, when they're cute, you know, I would say the best piece of advice I could I would love to see is to really stay away from vendor jargon. So I know that that's something that people hear again and again, but it is just permeated throughout things. You know, if I'm just learning, don't assume that I know all of your buzzwords and acronyms, because I probably don't. So I will say, though, I've yet to meet a vendor who doesn't do this, so I do know that it's difficult. And I've been in the software industry, too, so I understand the position that you're in.
So should they keep talking to you to get your attention and remind you that they're there?
Yeah, you know, I would say reminders are helpful, but not too many because you're going to turn me off. You know, a good vendor offers value, even though I may have had a conversation with you in the beginning and said, hey, I don't have something right now. Keep reminding me of your value, and in a format for me that works really well has helped me to continue learning, not only about your logo, but about your logo and context of what you can provide. Teach me something. You know, if you do that, then you stay on my radar, and I'll call you when I have a relevant project that becomes a priority then.
Great, thanks. Rick, can you go through kind of the same questions where a vendor did a great job or an awful job?
Sure. I think Kimmy gave a great answer to the question to start with. I think some companies have done a great job with relevant content at different phases of the buying process cycle, including the research and so forth. And I didn't want to go into specific logos, but I will in this case. I think Riverbed is a company that does a really decent job with their content marketing. They go out of their way to show that they get the problems you experience and the value they can bring is demonstrated throughout their content. They teach you about WAN acceleration. They highlight the people leveraging it to improve productivity across a distributed enterprise. On the downside, I don't necessarily want to name any specific vendors, but articles or blogs or newsletters that talk about features and capabilities without the practical application of their products really brought out early, it will lose my attention.
And what about the number of pieces, or what kinds of content get your attention?
Remember that whole, I brought it up earlier, the 7 times to recognize a brand before you start to pay attention to it. I believe that's probably true, because a lot of times I'll see a vendor's name, but it won't really register. But over time, as I start to see more examples where this vendor is next to that business solution to a problem, it starts to set in, and when I experience that problem or when I'm ready to buy, it's one of the ones that I'm definitely going to look at.
Great. So last section, making a decision. So you've got the vendor landscape, and now you're in this research mode where you've got to make your short list of vendors even shorter. So in this case, you're starting formal discussions. You have to make sure everything's aligned, and you really need to understand what these companies have to offer. How are you, let's talk about engaging in that kind of research. So once you're in this mode and you're starting to engage with them, how do you learn more about these vendors? Because once, you know, I hate to say it, but sometimes when you get a salesperson on you, it's difficult to stop. It's kind of like, when can I call you next? When can I call you next? And a lot of times you may just want a little bit of an anonymous type of research. Rick, why don't we start with you on this question?
So it's at this stage, I like to be diving more into specific use cases or business cases and case studies of how something was implemented, and I'm not necessarily looking. I'm not a buyer yet, right at this phase. So if I get on their radar screen, that's okay. But I'm really looking for that more deep dive solution example, and possibly lots of different logos that are associated with having implemented that solution.
Kim?
Yeah, you know, I would have to say that, you know, not different from Rick. You know, I'm looking at it the same way, and I receive, you know, a dozen phone calls on some days more. You know, so I'm less likely to pick up a call that I don't recognize. So I do keep a file of vendors who email me relevant things. So sometimes I'll pick up the phone and I'll ask for somebody to send me something. But, you know, I'll reach back if it's something I'm interested in. And vendors that can do that, you know, in timely fashion, those are the ones that I pay more attention to.
Now, I will also add in here that I will leverage the RFP process. So when I'm making a major purchase, I'll even as part of the vendor analysis piece, I want to better understand what their specific solution to my business problem in the context of my environment would be. So if I haven't seen a lot of that in the white papers and case studies that I've read, that'll be part of the RFP.
Do you look for resource centers on their websites or anything like that, or do you just go right to RFP?
Oh, absolutely. I expect to find things like those case studies and white papers in their resource centers on the website if they have those.
Okay, great. Okay, so what about a vendor who may have done a great job engaging with you? Again, this question about a specific example, a great job engaging you or a great job disengaging you. Kim, why don't we go with you?
Sure. You know, I actually recently had a fantastic experience with a vendor who, this is going to sound odd, that couldn't answer my questions. And the thing that was so great about it is that they didn't try. And they had the right department, you know, to give it the college try, but you knew you'd only get part of the answer. Instead, that vendor went and found a partner, brought that partner along with him, and answered things correctly, and that made all of the difference. And actually, for the original vendor that was there, it left a large sum of money on the table for them. And I actually thought, wow, they're actually listening to what I need and thinking about bringing the right fit for my needs to the table, and they recognize the value of knowing their weakness and brought the right player. Needless to say, they won the job.
That's great. Rick?
I think it's harder and harder to do anonymous research today. In a lot of cases, the case studies and white papers that you might want to look at for a given solution, you have to provide an email address to even download. So I respect that, and I get it. It's how you have to drive leads. My issue there is that it's hard for a salesman to know when I'm just educating myself on a topic or if I'm getting serious about buying. And I confess, like Kim, if I don't recognize a number, I won't answer the call. In fact, I'm even worse. I have 2 phone numbers, one that I answer and one that I just let go to voicemail. But I do listen to those voicemails. If the product is related to a problem that I'm having, though, I will probably skim the email. I'll download the paper, and eventually, if I'm ready to get serious, I'm going to return a voicemail or send an email, and they'll know that they're in the cycle with me.
Great. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide because I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions. Okay, getting down to the brass tacks of what it takes to actually get your business. The fire sale that is depicted here, does that really work, or what should vendors keep in mind when really trying to get your business? Rick?
Okay, so I'm all about doing proofs of concept where we can, and if they have a streamlined means of doing that, or even have papers that have addressed that they can help you do pilot phases really quickly, hopefully with our own data, that's very helpful.
Okay, Kim.
Yeah, and try before you buy, certainly same vein that Rick is saying. Reference calls and visits, I want to actually talk to somebody that's like me or has experienced a similar problem and kind of bat around ideas and figure out if that vendor is the right fit for me as well.
So what expectations do you have once you start these conversations, and obviously you're in the driver's seat there? What do you expect? If you're not ready to purchase at that point in time, what do you expect from an ongoing communication standpoint? Kim?
Sure. Ongoing, I want to believe that the vendor actually cares about more than just making one sale. It should be about satisfying and keeping us as a customer overall. I want to continue to learn and get some sort of value either for myself, my team, even my business community. So I approach sourcing as a long-term commitment by both parties. It can't just be my team always trying to just pay the bills. I can't afford also a revolving door. So, this is a long-term commitment, a marriage of sorts, if you would. And so, and I don't want to let anybody forget that all of the tools that we mentioned before, websites, webinars, emails, all of those tools we mentioned are not only equally good to make a sale, but they're equally as good for continuing education, and they are on my radar all the time.
All right, Rick.
I think that was so well said. Yep. Yeah. I think that was really well said, Kim. I don't like managing 50 different relationships with vendors. I'd spend my entire day managing relationships and not doing any real work. So while business problems change, if a vendor can show me that they're staying relevant to emerging technologies and trends, they've got a better chance from hearing from me than someone I don't already know. So once you've got me, it's easier to keep me on the hook if you keep your content fresh and relevant to the way technology and trends are changing.
All right, great. So before we dive into the questions, I just want to ask a question that I've been dying to ask personally. To tweet or not to tweet, that is the question. Do you guys pay attention to Twitter? Kim?
Yeah, I have to admit, personally, I haven't found it to be, I'll call it one of my top methods. I had a bad experience from what I call, the infamous over-tweeter, and and it really soured me for a bit. So I'm slowly getting back into the game now, but Twitter, I've yet to find somebody that's mastered the art of tweeting.
Rick?
I'm kind of with you. I'm sort of all over the map on this one. I used to be pro Twitter, but I find that I leverage it more around events and short-term trends than I do around a business problem or something like that. Because at this stage of the game, I see so many people that I once followed that almost look like they're syndicated columnists, and just everything they hear about they turn around and retweet, and it's just become too much noise.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. So, Kim Lloyd, are you back with us?
I don't know. Did we lose Kim then?
I think we did. That's okay. Well, I think we're just about at the end to get into some questions and answers, and I want to thank all of you. But I know that if Kim Lloyd comes back, she can jump in. But apparently, the summary of what we've covered on how to get started and how to take this insight into action is really to pay attention to the buying cycles and to remember. It's not all about you as the seller. It's really about the buyer. I think we heard some good examples from Kim Seabury and Rick Lloyd on how they're looking to hear personality come through, that somebody takes some interest. And again, it's about consistency and quality. So we've got a lot of questions here, but I want to ask everybody now to help us with our final poll before we jump into the questions and tell us that based on today's discussion, what are some of the strategies that you plan to incorporate to get on the radar screen of the IT buyer? We've gone over a lot of stuff, and the good news is there is going to be a recording of this webinar, and I know I'm personally going to go through it and take copious notes because there's a lot of great stuff in here we heard. But go ahead and vote. Is it, and choose all that apply. Is it choosing the right channels to promote your message? Is it make content marketing a core competency and not an afterthought? Is it demonstrating thought leadership and communications? I kind of think we heard a little bit about that from Kim in the last portion there, and Rick on over-tweeting. Is it setting aside a budget for content marketing initiatives, or more frequently communicating the market? Which of these are things that, based on today's discussion, would be strategies that you would plan to use to get on to the radar screen of the IT buyer, to get them to consider what you have? So I'm going to keep the poll open just another moment or two. I see we've got quite a few people voting, and then I'm going to go ahead and share the results, and we'll give you some information on how you can get some more information and start responding to your questions. So it looks like we've got everybody who has voted has. Let's go ahead and close the poll, and let's share the results. Pretty interesting. So 28% choosing the right channels to promote your message, 47% making content marketing a core competency and not an afterthought, 63% on demonstrating thought leadership and communications, and 13% set aside budget for content marketing initiatives, and 9% more frequently communicating. Fantastic. Okay. Before I call you guys back up to the virtual podium, just a moment to tell you, if you want more information on Rock the Deadline, you see their website up there. You can also join the conversation on LinkedIn, and I encourage you to give them a call and find out how they can help you. Also, if I can just make a quick little mention of WebAttract, if you're interested in learning more about webinars, we heard it mentioned quite a bit today as a content marketing vehicle, give us a call. There's also a new ebook on our website that we wrote called Webinar Ready, and it's all about producing, delivering, and hosting successful webinars. It's complimentary. We hope you take advantage of it. Well, let's get right into the responding to the questions, folks. And the first question that I have is, can one of you rank and discuss the importance of when to use a white paper or case study to help impact purchasing decisions? I guess I'll give that, let's just try that with Kim Seabury, unless Kim Lloyd is back. But go ahead and try it.
I am back, by
the way. Go ahead, Kim. Go ahead, Kim. Thank you. Go ahead. Why don't you take that one?
I think from my perspective, I think it's important to keep in mind what Kim Seabury had mentioned earlier, which is definitely a case study and a white paper help you make purchasing decisions. But if you lead with that, I think you're going to lose your audience really quickly. You have to demonstrate a broad base of expertise, including those little tidbits of research and education material that Rick had talked about. So you need layers of content, and you don't just dive right into the deep stuff quickly. So starting your relationship with your potential end customers with little shorter, maybe 500-word educational articles or 300 to 500-word blog posts covering a lot of different broad educational areas is really important, and then link to the call to actions, which are the white papers, the case studies. I want more. Again, I'm just trying to reiterate some things that Kim and Rick had talked about earlier. I don't know, Kim or Rick, if you have anything to add to that.
I'll just chime in that I was very refreshed to see the results of that final poll there, showing that folks out there want to demonstrate thought leadership in their space, which to me means the communication across all those phases. So help me better understand the space and get educated, and then those specific case studies and white papers on how those technologies have been applied to business problems that other customers are having to solve them.
Thank you. And I'm going to give this over to Kim Seabury and then Rick or whoever wants to jump in first. This is from Bill. How do you prove as a VAR or a vendor that you have solved these problems before if you can't get through the noise? And I think that's a very interesting perspective. So Kim or Kim Seabury or Rick Lloyd, do you want to go for that?
Sure, I'll jump on it. You know, and wow, what a great question. I think in the industry I'm in now, that's even more relevant than ever, because the industry that I'm in is so regulated. I want to make sure that the vendors that I'm working with, as best they can, are up on all of the things that I am annually audited on. So that certainly always piques my interest when I see those sorts of things. But yeah, I will admit frequency in education and just getting me familiar with what you do along with your logo, I think, are the two most important things. So I'm not sure that I can give you any more clarity than that, but it typically is around a specific business problem as well. So Rick, I don't know if you want to add to that?
Yeah, you kind of hit all the highlights there. If I see a logo for a vendor and I've seen it attached to a solution to a problem, even multiple times, then it's going to get a higher chance of me looking at it than one that I've just seen a product list for.
Well, to tag on that question, also from Bill, so how do you know what the person's problem is if you don't have a dialogue? So I think the way I frame that is, help me, tell me how I can give you some information that will rise above the noise that you'll want to talk to me. So if you can give us a little insights on how you would recommend a vendor or a provider to approach you if they don't have a dialogue with you.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, because to get to that point where we're having a dialogue, we've already matured along that communication cycle a given a set amount because of our anonymity and our research in the early phases. So I think having that track record of communication that I might have gotten without being specifically targeted for a sale per se gets me closer to the point where I'll engage with you and I'll go into specifics to say, okay, yeah, so I saw that you had this solution for a vendor, or I'm sorry, for a company that sounded sort of like mine. Let's go into the specifics of my exact problem and see if we can tune what you've done for my company.
Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, I just want to add to Rick. I echo that completely because I have never come across a problem where suddenly I'm the first person in the universe that's ever had that problem. You know, somebody has paved the road for me before. I want to know what they did to pave that road, and I want to talk to the vendors that help them do that, because that decreases the risk in my projects, and it also can speed up time to implement or do whatever you're going to be doing with the vendor.
Thanks, Kim.
Hey, Mike, real quick, I just want to say, if we don't get to all the answers today and questions today, I want to make sure that everybody knows to join our Rock the Deadline LinkedIn group, because we will let people post questions there and then try to get them answered in our LinkedIn conversation. So just wanted to mention that.
Right, I put that back up on the screen. Actually, that's a great segue to the next question. Graham wants to know, and I'm going to direct this to you, Kim Lloyd. Do you think that LinkedIn groups will be more influential for B2B peer review and advice in the buying cycle?
I absolutely do. I think that LinkedIn groups are one of the first resources that people go to do business type research. Besides, obviously, Google is one of them. I just wish LinkedIn content was a little bit more Google search friendly. But then another complement to that is our Google Circles. I think you're going to see them grow over time too, but there's no doubt in my mind that LinkedIn groups are a great way of connecting with business people. And I don't know if Kim and Rick can talk about if they use it.
I absolutely use it, and you know, I mentioned it earlier when I was doing my ERP research. I specifically went up there to ask people about vendors that I had historical relationships with, but not current. So I wanted to see what the current thought was with peers out there.
Great.
Yeah, I have just started doing that as well. Another one that I actually use is, I don't know if folks are familiar at all with the social monitoring tool Radian 6, but it's something that we have in our enterprises, and you can search for sentiment around a given company in the social media sphere as well. And I have to confess, I actually do care about what the sentiment is for a potential vendor.
Excellent.
So LinkedIn groups, definitely a big yes for everybody involved, I think.
We got that. Good. And here's a question that came in during the registration that Kim, Sue, Lloyd, I'm going to toss this to you. What are some of the key criteria to keep in mind when creating supporting content and developing nurturing campaigns? And I think this ties back to what Kim Seabury and Rick Lloyd said, is that they may not absolutely be in the buying cycle to make a decision, but what are some of the things that we can do as sellers to keep our information fresh and nurture the relationship?
Okay, one thing for sure is that I want to reiterate is that we heard was it's not all about you. It's not all about your features and functionality. I think it's a mistake that, you know, in my past role as being an enterprise product marketer, it was so easy to talk about this great feature and then how that feature is used. And I think that has its own time and place, but at the very beginning when you're trying to reach people like Kim and Rick, or the people that are whispering in Kim and Rick's ear, you want to make sure it's not all about you. It's about putting making sure that you're demonstrating your understanding of their business problem, their business pain, who's using it, how they're using it. You know, find some humor. You know, find some way of talking to them. They're not robots. They're real people, and they appreciate you using humor to get out there too, I would think. The other thing to keep in mind is where they are in the buying cycle. If they're in, and that's why this whole webinar was based around their 3 functional areas, because their research mode of what content's important to them is different within those cycles, and that's why we did an enterprise computing one, because every industry has its own buying cycles, its own educational needs. So short form, more educational pieces in the beginning, closer to buy decision, deeper dive on solutions. And then don't forget, you need to also be out there more regularly. You can't just produce one great white paper, market the crap out of it, and then expect it to just be the end-all, be-all solution. You need to be out there in multiple touch points at multiple times, addressing the problem, the solution set from multiple angles. So that would be my advice.
Fantastic. Just before we get some final housekeeping, Rick Lloyd or Kim Seabury, would you like to weigh in with any thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, I'll echo a lot of what we've already said, and that's that I definitely want to hear from folks. I want to understand. I want you to help me understand a given space even before I know it's a problem for me, and then as time evolves, to see how your solution is being applied to real-world business problems, and then once I'm already a customer, I want to know what else you do and how you're staying relevant to a given market, and how you're maturing the product that I may already have acquired from you, so that it stays relevant to me going forward.
Thanks. And Kim Seabury?
Yeah. Sure. You know, my thought process running an entire IT department, I've got a global footprint that I've got to manage. I'm looking at long-term relationships, like I said before, but I have real day-to-day tactical problems that my team has to solve, as well as kind of strategic vision that I have to build on top of what the company is trying to achieve. And looking at technologies against those two things, I do look at them differently. So think about that when you are trying to get my attention. So if your product or service is there to solve a tactical problem, you know, think about it from the context of sitting in my shoes and taking on that phone call versus, hey, I've got an enterprise solution that I want to put in place because it's going to help us strategically. And those are two different buying cycles for me. And, you know, I'm careful about spending money. So IT budgets, you know, you've heard this time and time again, they're not growing, they're shrinking. I need to make sure I'm getting good value out of it, and continued good value. It's not a one-time purchase, it's a relationship.
Well, Kim Seabury, Rick Lloyd, Kim Sue Lloyd, speaking of value, thank you all for being with us today. And we do hope that everybody in the audience got the value out of joining us, and that you'll attend future events. You're going to receive a short survey. We'd love you to weigh in on how today's webinar met your expectations and what else you'd like to know. And again, as Kim Lloyd said earlier, for those questions that we couldn't answer on the air, we'll make sure that one of our subject matter experts responds to you as soon as possible. And you will be receiving an email with a link with a copy of today's recorded webcast, and we hope that you'll take the opportunity to listen to it again. Again, thanks to our speakers, Kim, Rick, and Kim, and our sponsor, Rock the Deadline, for making today possible. And again, as your moderator, this is Mike Agron saying have a great rest of the week, and bye for now.